we all doing well? No one's complaining. So yes, we're doing well.
Nice.
Oh, I thought I could. I don't get to play with the camera tonight, okay? Didn't you show me how that works? Oh, it's right. It's the city battleground. There we are.
Oh, yes. Works for me.
Yeah, I think we'll just go with that. I'll just come out of there and do what you like. Shouldn't have shown me that.
Yeah. Huh? I'll start, you can fill in.
It is 7 o'clock. If you'll join us, please, for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
And to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Ms. Cameron, let's see who's here.
Here. Here.
Here.
Present.
Here.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah. I should pay closer attention.
Mayor Johnson. Deputy
That's okay.
It's all good.
That's okay. I'll answer to anything. Just ring the bell when it's dinner time. Council member reports, are there any? Let me come out of that. Hang on. There we go. Mr. McCoy, sir.
Yeah, we attended, council members, Bowman, Cortez, myself, and city manager Aaron, city manager attended the governance. The legislative committee met with our local representatives and got kind of a rundown on the session. And as we all know, it was extremely partisan. So we didn't get a lot of projects approved, but there was some interesting information shared. I can just give you my takeaways and I'll let the other two add in. But essentially, the gist of it was the squeaky wheel gets the oil, and there's a lot of city councils that every single one of them is contacting their legislators. So I won't call any of them out, but basically they're advocating at a very high level. And they intimated that that's okay for us. You need to reach out. You need to be constant contact, asking what's going on. They also mentioned that in the past, we've had council members, specifically council members Cortez and Bowman, they mentioned that they testified for bills, and that was very useful. That garnered a lot of favor as far as helping them out as well. So that's kind of a quid pro quo that we can think about. You know, making time to do that is very appreciated. And finally, that the lobbyist is a must. The constant contact being just in the know of what's going on the floor, what's going on in the session. Without that type of contact, we would be probably, last in line, so to speak. So that was pretty much my takeaways. I don't know if you gentlemen have anything else to add.
Before we get to you, Mr. Cortez, it's my hope that once we figure out on November who the two new representatives will be, that we can just, rather than waiting for breakfast or any of that, if we can just figure out who they are and invite them in the very next meeting, so that we can all know who they are, meet everyone, get a email address and a phone number.
Cell phone numbers to everybody would be really.
Mr. Cortez, sir.
Thank you, Mayor.
Yes, sir.
No, I think
Councilmember McCoy said it quite well in terms of what happened during our legislative meeting there. The only thing I'll add, I won't add anything to that, but the city manager and myself, we went to DC this past, what day it is? Yeah, this last week.
Last week, yeah.
Yeah.
It was a very short trip, but it was, I think, highly productive. We had the chance to actually face-to-face meet with Senator Murray, State Rep or U.S. Representative Herrera Butler, and heck, I even ran into Joe Manchin, said hello to him. So,
Oh, no kidding.
But no, I think the meetings were great. We advocated for Grace Avenue. We advocated for the 92nd sewer project, our public safety items that we advocated for, as well as our senior center remodel. So I'm hoping, keeping our fingers crossed, that we were really effective, and time will tell in the next couple months whether we are able to get some money. I will say, on an anecdotal note, though, when we were sitting down with Senator Murray and we had the map laid out, and she walked in, she probably spent maybe 5 minutes or so with us, and then she left and we chatted with her staff. But when she's looking at the map and, she's asking questions, and one of the things I pointed out to her when it came to the Grace Avenue money that we were seeking, I said, Senator, and right over here is a community center where there's the Murray Pavilion. And she instantly paused and she goes, oh, really? So I'm going to keep my fingers crossed that maybe that helped.
That was 15 years ago, 14,
Yes.
14 years ago. And before we move on, did they give a timeline when we might figure that out?
I mean, it could be next 3+ months before we
Yeah.
get,
The fall?
yeah.
They're hopeful for the fall. And I know she had mentioned that if they didn't make it by September, then it probably wouldn't be till the end of the year, but they're pushing really hard to get all that stuff done by September. So.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Easy there, easy back?
Yes, unfortunately, when we came back, our flight was delayed by like 6 hours because a gentleman went into cardiac arrest. And so,
On the plane?
yeah, it was on the.
Yeah, they
yeah.
were coming from Alaska,
Yeah.
I think, and they had to emergency land in Chicago. So,
Oh, so your plane got
yeah, it got delayed.
got
getting there.
delayed in Chicago. Oh, bummer.
So, yeah, other than that, everything's good. So,
Well, we're glad to have you back. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Just have a couple things. I met with Discovery Clean Water Alliance on the exit audit with the state, and everything was good there. It's nice to be in partnerships with people that can pass audits and do a good job doing so. On the a little bit more on the legislative side, that some suggestions that have been passed along. I spent about an hour on the phone with Mr. Weiss Friday. And one of the things that we talked about was the meeting that we had just had. And one of the things that's really important that we get the benefit of, we all bring political views or ideologies to council, but the beauty of council position is we get to be nonpartisan. So when we go to the state level, one of the things that's important for us is that we have a lobbyist who is fairly nonpartisan. Like I couldn't tell you which way. I could tell you, I grew up with Josh, so I can tell you maybe a little bit more about him. But most people that he works with up there don't know which way he is. He's up there lobbying on behalf of the city, what's right for the city, not necessarily what his own personal views are. And that's one of the things that can be a struggle for councils is our legislators or legislators that we work with, or even ones that don't represent us that we have to work with, whatever those people that we're sending up there to lobby on behalf of us, or whatever, or whoever we send up to lobby on behalf of the city from council, we have to be real careful because that's where we're trying to look out for what's best for the citizens of Battleground. I don't care if I'm super conservative and, you know, someone that's super liberal supports our program. That's what's right for the city of Battleground. And so we just need to make sure we're careful with that some of the things that we say, some of the things we do, we post, because if we're going to get anything for the city of Battleground, I mean, there could be a change this next year. They're thinking the midterms here might have a change, but if it stays the same, we have to work with legislators that are in the majority to be able to get our projects through. And so we have to figure out how to do that and get them to support our projects. The other thing that we need to look at as a council is we have really hit hard transportation. And transportation, the dollars for transportation are slim. They're very hard to get. We're competing with Seattle. What we took from that meeting was Seattle got everything, everyone else got left out. So what are some of the other pots we can go after? And one of the things they talked about was capital projects that they said, if we'd had a capital project, we got funded this year, easy. Last year we had, what was it, 2 million?
Yeah.
Two and change in a capital project. So I think that's something that as we get ready for next year and the next session that council needs to look at, or what are some of the things that can fall into capital projects? One of the things they brought up was, like they said, if you wanted a bike lane, we could have done a bike lane all day long. Well, could we do a bike lane in a sidewalk? You know, so some of those things we have to think outside of the box of just let's go after the big stuff and figure out maybe some little wins get us in places that we want to be. So think about that as we're going forward. But I think that we have good representation down here. It'll be interesting to see where we go in the next year with 2 new ones. And, you know, contrary, I asked the question, you know, are you leaving Olympia because of what Olympia has become, you know, and because you feel like you can't get anything done? And they said, absolutely not. So, you know, I don't think that that's the issue. We just need to do a little bit better job reaching out. And if maybe that's our job as a legislative committee, is to get all of you guys the contact information, or the city to get all the contact information, shoot them texts, those type of things, and have those relationships with whoever's going to be there. And I would suggest pretty much anyone from Southwest Washington that knows us. We want to have their contact information and be able to just shoot them a text. And sometimes it's just as simple as, hey, is there anything we can do to help you out? That makes a big difference. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir. Moving forward, as we go through the summer, the fall, and the winter of this year, what we'll do as I call them happy hands events that we all get invited to. The mayor mostly gets invited to. I'll be glad once those come to send it out to everyone. And if you want to go with me, we can go down. I know everybody. We can go down and you can meet Miss Cleveland and you can meet Miss anybody, Paul. And so I'll send those out and we'll just start going to the happy hands events and eating rough chicken and meeting people. Anyone else? Seeing no one else. My case, I did where he did an exit audit. I did an entrance audit for the city. It's amazing. The only questions they ask you, do you think everyone is legitimate and honest? That's pretty much 12 questions in different formats of, do you think everyone's dealing from the top of the deck and not from the bottom of the deck? Yes, ma'am. You know, are you sure? Yes, ma'am. So that's 20 minutes doing that. And then today I spent roughly 3.5, 4 hours with some mayors going through homeless camps in Vancouver and looking at what they've done and thinking about, oh my gosh, at some point that may come here. I hope not, because they're spending millions of dollars. They ran a tax levy to help finance it. There were some tough things we saw, and there were some very nice things. They're really doing a good job about it. if you're interested down the line and want to take a tour one day, we can certainly set that up and have you go down and see what's going on. Mr. Rogers, I can't see you on the pad, but do you have anything for us?
No.
Okay, thank you. And now, Mr. Green, please, sir. It's your turn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Actually, I'm going to turn this over first to Susan Ellinger from county staff to kick us off. And I will attempt to move slides.
Welcome, Susan.
Thank you very much. My name is Susan Ellinger. I'm with Clark County Community Planning, and I'm here with Chuck Green, the chair of the Commission on Aging. And thank you so much for having us tonight. And I'm sorry. There we go. We have a brief presentation that we'd like to share that summarizes the Commission on Aging 2021 annual report.
All right, so it's not moving. Which one?
I think, yes, there you go.
You wanna
I
move it?
moved it. Yes.
Oh.
I'll just keep moving it for
I
you.
give up. I'm just an engineer. I can't do-
We'll let
Yeah,
Ms. Urban take care of it. Is that okay with you?
Oh, that's perfectly fine.
So Susan, if you'll just mention next, and Ms. Urban will square that away.
Okay, thank you so much.
Uh-huh.
We plan to cover the items listed on this slide, and we're hoping to leave plenty of time for discussion at the end. Next slide, please. Clark County, as everywhere in the country, is anticipating a huge surge of number of residents that are 60 or better. By 2035, 1 in 4 Clark County residents will be 60 or older. With a silver tidal wave coming our way, in 2012, the then Board of County Commissioners appointed a 9-member Commission on Aging. The commission's charge is to provide leadership in addressing the special needs of the aging population and manage and assist the implementation of the county's Aging Readiness Plan. The Aging Readiness Plan covers the topics listed in the image here: housing, community engagement, supportive services, healthy communities, and transportation. Education, awareness, and advocacy are the means by which we do our work. Chuck is now going to discuss some of the commission's activities from 2021. Next slide, please.
All right, thank you, Susan. Again, I'm Chuck Green. I'm chair of the Clark County Commission on Aging. And we pick a topic a year and focus on that topic. I do want to point out that our topic as we entered 2020 was community engagement. And then that kind of got derailed. It was just over 2 years ago. We were about ready to have a joint meeting with you all. And 3 days before that meeting was when the shutdowns happened. So this will be the first in-person presentation that we've given since that shutdown happened. And we actually then learned how to pivot. So we pivoted to dealing with COVID-19 and the impacts in our 2020 topic. In 2021, we then shifted to the road to recovery, which I think we're still in, but that was our topic from last year. And we actually changed it up as far as we held our meetings. We decided that we wanted to still engage the community, and we were one of the first groups to pivot to online public comment and real-time public comment. We actually have 2 or 3 comment periods during our meetings, but we changed it up to what's called a fireside chats. Instead of these presentations and then hold your questions until the end, we actually have our guests sit around as a panel, provide their experiences and anecdotes. We invite the community to take part during these presentations. And it's actually been a kind of a welcome change for all those, especially those who have found isolation otherwise from the COVID shutdowns. I'll go to the next slide here. So as I mentioned, last year was a road to recovery, and that's our annual report, what it covers. We invited guest speakers to attend our monthly meetings and participate in the fireside chats that I was talking about. These on this slide are the topics that we covered last year. Our annual report gives more details on the insights from these presentations, and in the speaker highlights section, And we also include what we learned from these meetings, which largely influenced our major findings and recommendations. Let's go to the next slide. In general, we found that Clark County has resilient people, and our annual findings and recommendations highlight ways to build that on that resiliency to create a more connected, prepared, and healthy community. A full list of our findings and recommendations begins on page 23 of the annual report, which is attached to your agenda packet. Well, we have too many to walk through all of them today. We have selected a few examples which we'll be sharing tonight. In regards to community engagement, our guest speakers shared examples in our own community and about other places throughout the country where community organizations try different ways to connect with older adults when in-person methods were not an option, such as community newsletters and increased phone outreach. One recommendation we have related to this topic is for the Commission on Aging to team with the Area Agency on Aging and Disabilities of Southwest Washington, otherwise known as ADSWA, to compile best practices for communicating with older adults and sharing them with local governments and community organizations so they can consider incorporating these practices into their work moving forward. Next slide, please. We learned that about the significant toll the pandemic has had on caregivers. A 2020 report showed 83% of caregivers surveyed were under increased stress since the start of the pandemic. 42% of caregivers surveyed said the support they normally received from their community declined. A CDC report in 2020 noted many caregivers have contemplated suicide and experienced an increase in other chronic behavioral health conditions. Hospitals and long-term care facilities were and still are experiencing a high rate of staff turnover, and the healthcare profession is expecting to be challenged to maintain its workforce moving forward. I think we've been continuing to hear about that. At the same time, there is an anticipated surge in nursing and medical school interest from young people. The commission recommends that employers throughout Clark County, including local governments, review their human resources policies and identify ways to better support caregivers. This applies to the healthcare sector with professional caregivers and to family caregiving in all employment sectors. Examples of recommendations are provided in the Recognize, Assist, Include, Support, and Engage, or RAISE, Family Caregivers Act initial report to Congress. Let's go to the next slide. We heard presentations on the role food can play with our health and how healthy eating and lifestyle choices mean we are less likely to experience severe chronic conditions as we age and may be more resilient to certain types of health pandemics complicated by existing conditions. We also heard about the racial disparities in health outcomes generally and how that has been exacerbated during the pandemic. One of our recommendations is for Clark County and its cities to build relationships and trust with community members who have traditionally been underserved and are most vulnerable to health impacts, such as communities of color. Local officials need to have conversations to listen and learn from these community members and then to act to address community needs. Another recommendation is for schools, workplaces, and hospitals to promote healthy eating and lifestyle options for students and employees, respectively. Increased funding for school meals would be essential to support change in schools. Workplaces offering flexible schedules to promote work-life balance would also complement any healthy eating and lifestyle initiative. Let's go to the next slide. On housing, Commission heard presentations from several organizations working to address housing and houselessness needs. The pandemic had a significant effect on housing across the county. Even before the pandemic, almost half of rental households were characterized as cost burdened. Nearly 30% were severely cost burdened. Our guest speakers highlighted how when you do not have a home, it creates barriers to dealing with anything else. And the biggest challenge here is the disconnect between incomes and the cost of housing. This impacts people with fixed income, such as some older adults and people with disabilities. Our guests also highlighted the connection between stable housing and improved health. One of our recommendations to local city councils is to continue to create policy and adopt development code to remove barriers for building housing that is affordable to people who are priced out of market rate housing options and that accommodates those with disabilities. Next slide, please. Emergency preparedness was one of those topics that actually got quite a bit of discussion. We met with first and early responders who shared recommendations of what households can do better to be better prepared for an emergency, and highlighted that the majority of 911 calls are for medical emergencies, many involving older adults. We also heard that 9 out of 10 families who the American Red Cross assists do not have an emergency preparedness kit ready. One of our recommendations is for neighborhood associations and other community groups to contact CRESA for emergency preparedness presentations. They can request them through the CRESA webpage. Another one of our recommendations is to add an emergency preparedness chapter to the Aging Readiness Plan, which we'll begin work on in 2022. Next slide. We, in 2020, handed out our first ever Silver Citizen Award, and that's to recognize those volunteers and a volunteer who goes above and beyond when it comes to supporting older adults in Clark County. We'd like to know that, excuse me, I'm sorry, I got off script here. Several jurisdictions in Southwest Washington be creating housing action plans I want to back up because my script here actually goes to the previous slide. So back.
Oh, certainly.
I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
So a few accomplishments regarding housing is that several jurisdictions in Southwest Washington have been creating housing action plans or updating their housing development code. We have been following these projects and are excited to see that the City of Vancouver and Clark County are considering creating incentives for visitable housing to be built, similar to what the City of Ridgefield already has done. This has potential to expand the housing options for aging adults wishing to age in place and have housing with a barrier-free entrance, wider doorways, and accessible bathrooms. It can also mean more opportunities for socializing in other people's homes for people who have a hard time entering a home with stairs. And personally, before I joined the commission, I had several other members of the Commission on Aging come to visit our house, which is built for aging in place. So it's a level entrance from the garage into the house, level entrance from the driveway through the front door into the house. So everything is without having to take a step up. And actually is very encouraging as we age in place. And my wife and I are doing a very good job at aging in place as we go along. I want to go to the next slide now where we talk about our Silver Citizen Award. In regards to our education, awareness, and advocacy work, the Commission awarded its second annual Silver Citizen Award to recognize Carol Starbuck for her amazing volunteerism in Clark County. We developed the award to recognize the phenomenal contribution older adults are having in our community. We also created a community member survey to find out how older adults would like to connect with each other, with people and resources. This survey was distributed in print and online formats in collaboration with several community partners in, I think, 4 or 5 different languages, and helped inform the community, will inform the communities or our commission's work in 2022. We received over 400 responses, and the interesting part, takeaway from that survey is how much people want to connect in person, either by phone or by personal visits, less so by email or social media, which probably is not surprising to a lot of you, but when we saw how much, and this is not just the older adult community in Clark County, but it's also the older adults with caregivers and with family members. It was pretty much across the board. We want to in-person contact. And I'm happy to say we're going to be having our first hybrid meeting in May since 2020. So that's one of the things, at least, is showing some positive advance in moving out of this pandemic. Let's go to the next slide. This will be the last slide. This year, we'd like to dive into the idea of innovation through connection, helping identify gaps and solutions to better connect people to each other and to the resources they need. We plan to hold monthly meetings where we invite expert guests to have fireside chats with us and the public. And we'll be also highlighting one community program per month to increase public awareness of existing resources in the county. And this coming month, or this month's meeting, will be having the Clark Cowlitz Fire Rescue CARES program, which is kind of an emergency engagement and just a check-in program that they are launching, which is of interest to us. Also, this is something I've advocated for since I started on the commission. We'll be embarking on our first update to the Aging Readiness Plan, which is now 10 years old. And I'm looking forward to that, especially as we add kind of advance and update our population, socioeconomic information, transportation, but also add a chapter on emergency pandemics and other issues, how we deal with emergency situations, especially with older adults. And with that, I'm going to stop and thank you for the time and see if you have any questions. Turn it to the mayor.
Any questions of Mr. Green and Susan? I do. Mr. Green, you spoke about, go ahead. If you want to go ahead.
Thank you.
I'll start when you're ready.
So a couple years, probably 4 years ago, I think we had this presentation on housing and aging in place and building houses for that, and some of the incentives that were out there. How have we done on that in Battleground, in your opinion?
I haven't looked at Battleground specifically. I can tell you that that was the year before I joined the commission. And one of the, it was one of those that there was a little disappointment because the commission at that time was advocating for incorporating aging in place standards in the housing code, development code.
Yes.
And it didn't make it. There was a little bit of pushback from developers as to what are we doing? You're adding costs to the house. And then you're talking about affordable housing. What's the trade-off here? And so it did not advance, at least in Clark County as a government. We have talked since then about creating some type of incentive program to maybe help bring in voluntarily bringing in these codes or aging in place standards, but having some incentives, which could be breaks on impact fees, could be breaks on permits or something like that. And we just haven't advanced that, but it is one of those that some of the members have talked about wanting to do. So Battleground specifically, I guess I'd have to turn to the city administrator as to if there's been any code updates in the last couple of years that have worked on aging in place or.
Not necessarily from the building code standpoint. I know we've made some adjustments to the accessory dwelling units to make those a little bit more easily available and to be built and not have to have a renter occupied situations. But other than that, on the building code side, we haven't done much unless Sam has anything else. Sure.
I would be interested to see, I know developers will complain, if it costs another $50, right? It's $50. And, but it'd be interesting to see, like, if we took, and I don't know if you guys have this, if you take a, 1,500 square foot home, what it looks like to develop it to age in place, what it looked like to develop it, with steps coming up to it or, depending on the lot. Right. And what that difference is. And I know, with developers, it's really about, and I'll go to the fire industry, fire sprinklers in homes. So developers, we don't want to do that. It adds the cost to the homes. We can't get it out of it. So what in California, what they did is they lowered lot lines then, so you can put more lots in the subdivision, but they all had to be sprinkled, right? And so they're like, okay, well, we're still making the same amount of money. We're getting a safety benefit from it. So, we'll do that. And I know, there's, that may be the stuff that we have to do is look at things like that and look at, maybe through impact fees or development fees or whatever it is, that if you're doing this, there are some incentives to be able to do that. Because I look at, we're going to talk about it later tonight in the meeting with a building inspector. We're starting to build a lot of homes out here again, and we've got some bigger subdivisions going in than we've had in the past. And it always seems like if we're not ahead of the game, it's 10 years later before something changes. And our community has changed. I know my community, my neighborhood has changed from young families with young kids to it's a lot of older people living in our neighborhood because it was single. There's only 2 or 3. I'm one of them. I'm 50 this year, so I'm almost protected class. But because there's only 3 2-stories in that neighborhood, right? And so you start to see that, and that I think that's part of like our visioning process. When we're talking visioning, we're talking about the ability to meet the needs of multiple different generations of people, right? And I think that's a plus for us. So I think that's something we could look at maybe a little bit later or need to look at so that we're not sitting here, everything's developed out and, we have, it's too late. So.
Well, and I think that it might be inherent in the builders to take an interest as well, because, we have 1 in 6 people in the county right now are 60 and over. By 2035, we're projecting that to be 1 in 4. So that means there's going to be a big market for people who want to have a level, accessible first floor, not have to worry about trying to make it up the stairs, and having to navigate from either a vehicle or in some cases, Ridgefield has it now, golf cart.
Yeah.
And so I think it might be time to do some type of a summit with them just to get gauge, because all they need is they need direction. They need to know what the code is. And so I think given the aging population and the need for accessibility, I think that time is now.
When I think the gentleman that presented last time talked about how much more you were able to get for those homes, even that were built that way. And I think about the population that we have moving in here. There's a lot of retired people starting to move in here. And I mean, yeah, they're worried about what they're spending on a home, but from my standpoint, they're really not worried about what they're spending on a home because they're paying a lot of money for these things, and so they're coming from areas where they've sold them for a lot of money. And, this is a very good market for them to come into. And if the home is right, I think they'd be willing to pay for it, but I don't build homes. So, but it would be interesting to see.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Normally 5% up front gets you the wider doors, 5% up front. And then on the renovation side, it's normally 25 to 30%. So 5% up front on 500,000, it's $25,000 to get what you need. And then on the backside, it could be $100,000. Because there's a lot of work to tearing out a 30-inch door and trying to fit a 36-inch door in.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and wheelchairs are being built for more sturdiness and electric assist, and they're wider now. But also, if you look at standards for an accessible living arrangement, that means counters will need to come down a bit. Refrigerators will need to be able to be opened by somebody in a wheelchair without having to the door bash into the wheelchair where you try and open it up. And so there are some considerations that need to go in it. But I agree with the mayor that if you do it now, it's a lot less expensive to do it now than try to retrofit.
Does and let me ask, Mr. Rogers, I'm sorry, do you have a question before we finish up here with Mr. Green?
I don't have any questions, but I recall that meeting that we had the presentation about the aging in place. And I remember I really liked the ideas that were offered, and I hope that it is something we can look at.
Thank you. And Mr. Green, we can't remember that gentleman's name. Do you happen to remember his name?
If he was in a wheelchair, that was Chuck Freer. If it
No.
was not, it was probably either Bill Ritchie.
Bill.
It was-
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
it was Bill.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
You can't forget Bill.
Yeah.
So-
Well, we did, but.
I
but you
used to
didn't, so.
go to Crossroads Church, so I remember we're still in touch. So
And then does the commission give presentations to groups? Will they come out on a luncheon meeting and do a presentation of what the aging folks do for the folks here in Clark County?
we haven't because of the pandemic, and part of it is we're a 9-member commission, so there's a bandwidth issue. However, we do have a presentation coming up to Fairway Village later this month, which will be our first group or neighborhood association presentation and I know forever. But we are also doing an aging readiness plan update this year, and we're hoping to hire a planning consultant to help us with that. And with that comes meetings and outreach. So yes, if you have opportunities for us to present to.
I know of a group of about 100.
That would be perfect.
And so, yeah, I'll be in touch and we'll
Okay.
see if we can't square that away. And then you mentioned, of course, older folks being priced out of the market. Today on my tour, as we went over on C-Trans property on Northeast 18th Street, there used to be whatever they called it. What would you call that? A terminal, I guess. And so it is full of RVs now. And they kind of have it set up in an interesting way. The older crowd is kind of, to the right, and then they kind of go down the line because I guess us older folks aren't as rowdy perhaps as the younger folks are. So very interesting. And there were probably, I don't know, 15, 20 senior RVs in the C-Tran lot. Very, very interesting. And then emergency preparedness. We've talked about that. Matter of fact, we have a deal coming up with Cressa. And then in my neighborhood, I set up with my neighbors. Cressa has an incredible bag that they'll send of all the stuff that you need. Just as simple as you should keep a pair of shoes by your bed because when the place is on fire, you may need them to jump out of the house. To here's what you need for a week kind of thing. So Cressa has really set that apart. And then finally, we talked earlier about meeting all the elected folks. We also need to meet those that aren't elected. And Mr. Green has done a great deal in our community for various things, we'll say, as far as precincts and who knows if we can find a cartographer down at the county, we may even know what district we're in somewhere in the coming week.
Yeah, I
or
had
two.
a little bit to do with District 5, so.
Yeah, so, if we can find a cartographer that can figure out a map, then perhaps we'll come up with that. And so, Susan, we're grateful that you're with us this evening. Mr. Green, of course, you're always welcome, both of you, anytime. And
Well, thank you.
Does anyone else have anything for Susan or Mr. Green? Thanks again.
Thank you.
Pleasure to have you.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Pleasure to have you as well. The consent agenda, does any council member believe that any item needs to be withdrawn?
Move to approve.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Oh, yeah, thanks. Sorry. Any opposed? Hearing none. Moving on to the business part. And here you are, Ms. Erdman. It's your turn.
Thank you, Mayor Johnson. I'm going to turn it over to Megan Lowry to talk about the TBD.
Hang on just a moment. I did miss citizens communications. Are you here this evening, sir, to speak to us? Come on up. I skipped that. That's my fault. And if you would just tell us who you are and where you live.
Okay, my name is Peter Nockway. I'm president of Delta Computer Systems in the Commerce Business Park.
Okay.
You probably are aware of where it is.
Yes, sir.
And I know you're Mr. Mayor and, okay, you're the police chief. Is a city prosecutor here?
No.
Okay, that's good enough. I'm going to sue the city of Battleground and for a lot of money. And the reason why is I was attacked by 3 people at my business. And the Officer Archer, you know him? Okay, he wrote a false police report. Now, you can make the claim that he was given bad information by the people that attacked me, because I was attacked at my business. They came onto our private road. And the young kid that started it all crashed into our property. You know, this was on December 27th. You got to remember it was snowing. And what they were doing is that they were racing around my business. Now, you know, my business is in the middle of the Commerce Business Park. And it's about 1/5 of a mile oval. And what they were doing is they were gunning their engines and sliding. They were cutting cookies in my parking lot. And I've got pictures of this. They were cutting cookies in the, what is it, the Spencer Plumbing, the one across the street. And they were running over the property, the grass in the Polaris Trail Tech parking lot. In other words, these people have no respect for private property. And I was taking pictures. And what happened is that this Ryan kid gunned his engine, went out of control, hit our curb, and I didn't know how much damage he did. And I was taking pictures. And he didn't have his license plate on right. So I went up beside his door to take a picture. And he slammed the door into me and said, "Don't you have anything better to do?" And he slammed the door into me again. I went back 4 feet because he must have used his feet to kick the door. And then he came out to attack me. Now I managed to defend myself and get up on the curb. He got a flagpole out and threatened me with the flagpole. Eventually what happened is his truck was pulled away because for some reason he couldn't reverse. You got to remember, he was going east on 17th Street, and then he slid and then ended up going north and running into our property. So he was actually in the other lane going, the other way. And, if there was another car going the other way, he would have run into them. He was mad that I was taking pictures of this incident. And that's when he attacked me. And after he got pulled away, he went back or away, and he must have got his father and a brother and his girlfriend, and they came up onto my street on 17th Street. And that's a private, or 18th Street. And that's a private street. It says for no public use. And they attacked me again. And the 2 guys attacked me. The 2 younger guys attacked me, and the father pulled a gun on me. And Officer Archer charged me with assault. Who are you kidding? Why would I attack 2 guys half my age and a guy with a gun? Then what happens is that the prosecutor, they know that I have pictures, I got video. The prosecutor then keeps on heaping charges on me, trying to get me to take a plea deal. Now, the plea deal was $330 and 5 hours of community service. Now, the 5 hours of community service is no big deal. I contributed more than that to the University of Washington, or the Washington State. It's the principle of the thing. I was not guilty. They were. You got a lying police officer. You've got 2 prosecutors, because the first prosecutor has left. And the second one just wanted to heap on more charges, trying to get me to take the plea deal. But I wasn't do it. So then what happens is it gets to 2 weeks ago, and I was supposed to have my, it was kind of like a pretrial hearing. And all of a sudden, charges are just missed without prejudice. You know what that means? That means that they can still charge me for 2 years. But what it really means is that nobody gets to see my videos proving that I'm innocent. And the thing is that the judge, who I think is a nice guy, but he somehow missed the point that they were on my property. And there were 3 people attacking me, not the other way around. And he actually said that there was a, what was it, restraining order is what you call it. I wasn't supposed to get one of, close to one of the guys that, I got close contact with. But they came on my property. So what sense does that make? Well, the reason why it doesn't make sense is because Officer Archer wrote a very vague report. He ignored the fact that it was a private street. He even got the name of the street wrong. They called it 18th Circle. It's really 18th Street. He ignored the fact that it's a private road. And I told him I had video and what they did, but he wrote the report listening to their lies. Nothing I said got into his police report. Now, what happened after that was, he gave me a ticket for 1 count of 4th degree assault. So then what happens is that on the 29th of December, I went down to the Battleground Police Department and I gave them a USB stick with my videos and pictures. And for some reason that got ignored. On Monday, I was sent an email with the police report. And when it was flagrant. It was flagrant. They said that I approached them, and when they came onto my property, they were just so full of lies and omissions. So then what happens is that we have the arraignment on the 6th of January, and Officer Archer, the judge just has Officer Archer's police report. That's all he's got. So obviously, he just wants to continue on. He doesn't bother to really read it. See the fact that there were 3 people attacking me, because it is a vague report. And then he just continues on, and then I have to go to all these stupid little meetings along the way with my lawyer. I had to get a lawyer, so I've had the expense of the lawyer. I've had 4 months of what they call mental anxiety, aggravation, and whatever. So now I'm suing the city of Battleground.
Well, you understand that, of course, in the 3 branches of government, we don't tell the judge or the prosecutor what to do. So we'll let you work with the prosecutor and your attorney. We can't step in the middle of that, as you know.
Well, he knows.
No, sir, he doesn't know. His
He's
part
the police
is
chief.
in this as well. So we're going to take you as you are this evening, but we can't state anything because we have no idea what happened or any of
I
it.
understand you have no idea, but I sent a USB stick on the 29th of December, and it was totally ignored. And then also my attorney has sent videos, the same videos to the prosecutor, and that was ignored. And even though it's obvious that this Ryan kid got out of his truck to attack me, they want to heap charges on me.
We hear you, we do. But again, there's nothing that we're capable of doing for you.
Well, if it weren't for video, I'd be screwed. I've got pictures. I got pictures on my, because on that night, I was taking pictures of the cars that were cutting cookies and that kind of stuff. Getting license plates. And some of the people take off their license plates so you can't get pictures. And the thing about it is on the 26th of December, the night before, it was also snowing. And what happened was that I called the police then, and they said, well, we're too busy. Well, that's fine. So that's why the police department's, the police website says, take pictures. And that's what I did. And yet I get attacked for it.
Again, sir, we appreciate you coming and we hear you, but you're going to have to take that up with our attorney, the city's attorney, and your attorney and the court system.
So is the city attorney the prosecutor?
No, sir.
No? Okay, because it's the prosecutor that I want to go after.
The prosecutor works for the city, that's correct, but he's not the city attorney.
Okay, well, on April 4th, the Supreme Court made it easier for people to sue prosecutors and police officers, and especially when it's flagrant and you got video, like I think this is a result of the Kyle Rittenhouse case.
then you need to do what you need to do, and we'll do the same,
Okay.
sir. And we
Well, at least you're a police
appreciate you
chief now.
coming.
So you're gonna have to.
Please, sir.
What?
You and me. Not the police chief, you and me. Please.
Okay,
And are you good? Are we good?
well, I'll leave now.
Well, no, I'm not asking you to leave, but I'm just saying there's really nothing we can do for you.
Okay, I understand that.
We hear you though.
You just gotta know that you've got bad police
And we hear you say.
and you got bad prosecutors.
Thank you for coming, sir. Moving on. Business, Transportation Benefit District, Ms. Erdman.
Thank you, Mayor Johnson. Yes, we're here tonight again to talk about the Transportation Benefit District. And if council would like to move forward with initiating a sales tax or car tab fee. So I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Lowry to start us off.
Good evening, council. We'll wait for a slide to go up. This is just a continuation discussion of what we started at our last council meeting. Wanted to kind of go through these numbers in more of a table format because it was asked to look at the utility tax and what that would look like if we were to reduce the utility tax, if we were to increase sales tax through the TBD sales tax. So in looking at what a reduction would do across, this is the blue area. I know this is a lot of numbers. I apologize. I know they can get to be a lot. So we have the 10% reduction would reduce our overall.
Excuse me for a second. Do we have somebody down there that can maybe make sure he gets out of the building?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Green.
Okay.
So it shows a reduction of what each of the different utility taxes. I did a 10% example, 9%, 8%, 7%, and 6%. Another piece to take into consideration is looking at our overall estimated surplus and or deficit. So when we're looking at ahead, we have to obviously make a lot of assumptions. And when we make those assumptions, we can't predict things like pandemics and wars and supply and demand and things we didn't realize were going to increase the economy or decrease the economy. Such as what we experienced during the pandemic. We originally anticipated something much more like a depression and ended up having this great boom that happened. So we saw a large increase in our sales tax. So what I did is I went ahead and looked at what our forecast was originally with our 22 budget. And then I plugged in an increased sales tax amount based upon what we've been getting and just projected that forward. So I call this the sunshine and roses projection. This is what it could be if everything continues as it is. I didn't do any changes to the expenditures. So this is with the exact same FTE that you approved as of December 2021. And so this is just status quo with no increases to staff, no increases to services. So when you're looking at reducing utility tax, you have to also look at, okay, looking ahead, if we reduce it, what are we going to need? Now to put another wrench in the fire, you look at what we've actually plugged in for the pavement preservation program for the street fund. So we actually were funding it at $750,000 in our forecast. And that's the minimum amount that we could do. And that actually, if we continue to do that, will reduce our PCI down to 69 from 72. Ultimately, the goal of funding is to be between $1.1 million, which would be keeping our roads at the exact same existence as they are now. And then anything above that would increase the PCI. The 1.8 million increased it, I believe it was 4 points if we continue to do that on an annual basis. So that being said, taking a look at our sales tax options, you can see what the 0.1% does, the 0.2% does, and the 0.3%. So when you look at these different options, you also have to think, are we going to continue to fund at the 750,000 or do we want to increase it? So would we combine, if we did the 0.1% with what we're currently doing, or would we go with something like the 0.2% and fund it completely from this revenue source and then be able to free up the general fund money to be able to do other services? That being said, I also gave some other numbers in there if we wanted to do some quick addition of what it would look like combining them. So I'm going to open it up for questions and discussions.
Boy, that's a lot of figures.
I know.
And there's a
a
little
lot of
saying
choices.
that my father used to say, I won't say it though, because that's a lot of figures. The green line is your sunshine and unicorns.
Mhm.
And then the third line down, since he can't see colors, the third line down is
The sales tax.
just the
option.
sales tax
Yeah.
option. And then the fourth line down is if we take current road, add whatever.
Correct.
Okay.
There's a lot of things to take into consideration with this, especially if you add in the potential of reducing the utility tax. Staff recommendation would be to wait to see what happens with the sales tax in and of itself before you start reducing utility tax in order to see what service levels. We haven't gone into the 2023 budget process yet, so we don't know what sorts of things we want to do with the general fund, if we want to pay for some projects with the general fund, if we want to increase services. So like I said, this is very rough when it comes to the forecast. This is very, like I said, sunshine and roses.
Well, we'll start with Mr. Sunshine himself.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not interested in looking at reducing the utility tax because the utility tax is a general fund tax and roads are general funds. And so it doesn't make any sense to go put 0.1% tax on people and then turn around and give money back. If we're going to do that, just don't take the tax. It doesn't make any sense to me to do it that way. It would be different if it was wasn't going into the general fund, but that's the same fund that we're using to fund all these projects is the general fund. And so it doesn't make sense to me to reduce the utility tax. The one question I have though is when we did the original transfer after the annexation, I see this year it's 822.5.
Mhm.
What was our first year? We were over $1 million, weren't we?
We still are. So this piece in and of itself is strictly the contracted work. So while there's still additional money going in for like the seasonals, this is where the meat of the street preservation work comes from, is from this transfer. So this is strictly the contracted work. And the reason why it's 822 in 2022 is because we're transferring from the TBD over to the street fund to be able to do additional. The original annexation in and of itself, the increase was about 1.1 million, I want to say, in comparison to the prior year, being able to fund more beautification as well as, again, additional seasonals to do that prep work for the contracted work. We used to only transfer about $400,000 from the general fund to the street fund. And that was for covering operational costs. We transferred no money for street preservation from the general fund. That only came from the TBD tab fees, which was 290,000. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I know it's a lot of figures again.
It's and I get where you're coming from. My concern is that this has always been a concern of mine. We do a 1% or 0.1% tax, and we generate 734,000, 804,000. The challenge I have with that is I still don't know that we can get the work done. And the challenge I see is my biggest concern is well, we may be able to do it right now because we got big enough projects to do it right now. But once those big projects are kind of, we fixed a few things and now we've got to do a bunch of little projects, that it gets really hard for us to do that. And so what happens then is it's just a replacement of the transfer that we're making. And so we say, well, we got 807,000 that's coming in this 0.01%. That gives us $750,000 from the fire annexation to use for something else. And whether that be, it doesn't matter what it is. It could be anything. But that's my only issue with this, is that I don't know that we can get $1.5 million worth of projects done once we start checking off these big ones. And I don't know. I like the TBD because it gives us control in those projects too, in what we would like to get done. But I in talking to the mayor about this, I remember the last time, and this is no one's fault, but I remember the last time, once we start down this path, and for council that wasn't here, the three of you that weren't here at that time, it'll go, well, we want more crack sealing done. Okay, well, we need more staff to crack seal. And so then we want to add in a full-time employee to oversee the part-time employees that are crack sealing. And then that can come out of the TBD, because that's, and so we start seeing projects start getting whittled down because we have to add more employees, but it's better for us to do it because it's cheaper. We don't pay prevailing wage than it is to go out to contract. And so these are all the things that start popping up that you start having to look at, and you're like, are we truly doing $1.5 million in work, or are we doing $500,000 in work and adding a bunch more employees? I don't know. So that's my only issue is we're a year and a half after, 2 years roughly after the fire annexation, but 2 years of COVID where we weren't fully going at this thing. And where, can we be there? Because I know, Mark, you were here before when there was a previous person in your position, and I was pretty upset that we had collected money that we said we needed and we couldn't get it spent that year. And, if we say we need it, if my son comes to me and says, hey, I need $20, I'm assuming it's not to invest in the stock market. I'm assuming it's because he needs $20, right? And so that's my only concern with this. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to let you know that Mr. Oshers has her hand up. I know we minimized the screen, so just letting you know that she's on the
going
list.
to ask. Thank you.
Yeah.
And Cherish, we'll get to you after Mr. McCoy.
Well, you might want to go to her first, because my question might involve Chief.
Mr. Rogers, we're heading to you.
All right. So I just wanted to say that, well, first of all, I'm wondering what 11% would look like. We go from 12 to 10 on the utility tax reduction. So I'm wondering what,
It'd be half, 108.
Okay, so 1%. So the reason why I wanted to do this is the point of this TBD is to capture the people coming into the city. So I just feel like for adding an additional tax and taxing people who don't live here, that we're just, adding more taxes for everyone. So I just wish that we could offset that slightly for the people that already live here, since we're going to be capturing it from the 86,000 people that live here. And then hopefully we'll get more retail businesses that will contribute more tax dollars. Yeah, I don't think I had anything else to say. It's just that I'm still interested in doing like a 1% decrease to offset the cost, so that we could give since we're just trying to spread the burden among the people that come and drive in the city and spend their money here.
Okey doke. Thank you.
I'll ask the questions if it involve Chief. That's
It's your
fine.
turn.
To Council or Deputy Mayor's point, what's the surrounding municipalities' utility tax just in general? Where do we range in that? Because I know Ridgefield has the 0.2 TBD. Where do they land on utility tax? Or
They're kind of all over the board. So they're around between 12% and 8% for the most of the cities that are our size. If you go to Vancouver, they're at 29%. So it's very dependent upon,
29?
yes,
They also have a very high sales tax too.
Mhm.
yes. I can't recall it off the top of my head, but they do have additional on top of that as well. But
Wow.
Yeah,
for
they're
the
eight-
most
they're-
part, for water,
8.5.
sewer and drainage, it ranges in that range. For the most part. So when we were at 22%, we were the second highest in the county next to Vancouver. When we reduced down to 12, which is where $1 million worth of the annexation savings came back, because I did go back into the taxpayers' pockets through that. We're definitely in the average now within bounds.
So, yeah, and I get what the deputy mayor is saying, and I understand her point. I would, if we're in that general range, I'd be, and if we're gonna do a TBD, I don't know if the utility tax would be something that really speaks to me, because it seems like we're shuffling pennies for dollars. But what I'd really be interested in, and what I guess for me from a citizen's perspective, say, when I'm walking around like the mayor does on his jaunts, and I walk by a house that I think the last time it was up for sale was in 2016, and the driveway is full of Oregon plates. And we're asking people to proffer up more money for roads when we have a large percentage that aren't even putting in the first dollar. So for me personally, I'd like to see something along a emphasis patrol. The mayor mentioned a particular school where every other car was out of state. Seems to me we should focus on getting everybody to pay their fair share and follow the laws of the road. And I was hoping to ask Chief, what our options are on that, if that's something that we've ever done, if that's something considered, if that's just not, we don't have the staffing. I know the staffing has been low. That's probably, that's been a large part of it. Not trying to heap on any aspersions at all. So I would be interested in hearing on that before we were to increase taxes on those that are here, as well as I personally would like to see, a list of projects that council would be considering to do with this money. Just giving me a dollar figure and saying, here's going to be, what you get. And then the seven, I take it the seven of us will then decide, well, I would rather see what does this get us as a city? Where would this money go to? What would be the projects? Where would potentially the safety impacts more so than street preservation would be my personal preference for some of it. But additionally, just a process question. If, say, just we were to pass the 0.1% here, if we were at one point to say, okay, we can't get the projects done, could we lower that to 0 for a year? Obviously, our 10-year timer has started, so no matter what we do in the meantime, doesn't reset that timer, but we could, something happens and the construction industry goes crazy again, and we can't get crack and seal, could we take that to 0 for amount of time?
Based upon the criteria that I was given of how that 10-year period works, I would think yes. I'd want a legal person to say yes to that, but I would think that that could be an option, because as soon as you instigate a sales tax, the 10-year period stops. If you were to delay it or put a pause on it for a couple of years, but bring it back, you're still within that 10-year period. So I would think so. But again, I want to verify that.
And then finally, I'm the timing of it, I'm not sure with, I know that's always to the mayor's point of the previous meeting, timing's never great, but I wonder about the timing. As far as right now, I'd prefer to maybe go a little slower on this, and I don't know what the thought process is on when we want to get this going, or what people want to do, but I'd rather maybe go a little slower than making a decision on something like this tonight. And again, I don't know what the end result is supposed to be tonight. So But I would like to hear, speak of the man, but I would like to hear an opinion on what our potential is for expired plates or out-of-state plates that maybe are on private driveways. And as far as, has the city ever done emphasis patrol on out-of-state plates? Is it something that we think it's beneficial or useful to do?
Tell them what we're talking
For the
He's aware.
TBD, because, sorry, so for the TBD, my point being that we're asking people to pay an extra tax. We have, seems to me, a large percentage of people that are not even registered their cars in the state of Washington, much less, which goes in the general fund when they pay sales tax on those cars if they come from Oregon, which has no sales tax. So it does all go into the same pot of money. So my question would be, has the city ever done any enforcement patrols on that? Any what's the word I'm looking for? Emphasis patrols on that. What are our options what are the suggestions for getting something like that done?
Well, to answer your question, yes, we have done emphasis in the past. We had a trooper that came and educated us a few years ago. WSP is primarily tasked, actually WSP and the State Department of Revenue is the one that gets the revenue from the enforcement. So it goes, essentially, it's a broad investigation. It's a significant major criminal investigation that takes a lot of effort and work. There is I think the more success is educating and getting people to comply. Because again, from what I understand, I think I understand this correctly, that the enforcement revenue, the fines are super high. That money goes into the state fraud account for this investigation that WSP and the Department of Revenue use those funds for. The benefit for the city. Battleground is the tabs, and we get people to register here. We get that tabs and whatever that revenue that comes from the sales tax that generates from the vehicle and all that. So there is work that we can do with that. I think it's going to be more geared toward education and getting people to comply. Because again, the value, the benefit to us to get these $5,000 fines to go into the state funds is not necessarily helpful for anyone. But I think there is work to do. It was probably 4 or 5 years ago that we did a last emphasis on
2016.
Yes, or something like that. We did an emphasis on out-of-state plates. I will say that it is. I talked to one of my WSP, the captain over here recently, and kind of got a little bit of insight from them. They do have a sergeant and a non-sworn staff that works with that. And they're happy to educate us again in the police world about what we can do to enforce that. So the plan marching forward is to get us some more education about what we can do. I want to communicate also with our prosecutors and attorney, and so make sure, because we haven't done this in a while, make sure that we're doing everything correctly. But it is likely going to revolve around education and compliance rather than building big criminal cases. I think
The last time, 2016. We met at the community center. The WSP sergeant came, and then the commander came. And mostly it was because at that point we were running $20 tabs and fares fare. And so what happened was, and what he described mostly was, I have my Oregon plate. They catch me, whatever. They come in front of the judge, and the judge is like, yeah, no. That's $1,400. You got your Washington plates now, dismiss. And so it would make the WSP guy, the cop guy go, yeah, why am I doing this? And so the police department at that point promised us that they would, we'll call them 1x4, 4x4 type peak things. And as they cruise around at night, they would see. The previous police department told us that these were people from Oregon visiting their grandparents, which I thought they're the most friendly people in Oregon I've ever met. They're up here. I see them every morning, matter of fact, on my walkabouts. They're visiting grandma, and they are very friendly to grandma. But the police department was going to cruise through. As they cruise through the neighborhoods, as you see an Oregon plate, an Idaho plate, a Montana plate, whatever plate it is, they would leave a note on there stating RCW says within 30 days. And your 30 days, as far as they were concerned, started that day. And so they would make a little note that they cruised by my house, left a note, and then 31 days from then, give or take a day, they would cruise back through to see if I followed. That hasn't happened. I guess what we're asking, and I'm asking, because as I cruise through these neighborhoods in the morning, I can tell you 10 just off the top of my head. I know the neighbors across the street. I have a partial electric car that I pay $150 for on registration. They're not registering. They register 4 years in Oregon for what, $100, give or take $1. So if I'm across the street from these people, I'm thinking, why am I paying to fix the road when these people across the street aren't playing my game? So I would ask, and I think Mr. McCoy's asking for just a little bit of fairness along the line, I guess. And if, I don't know if you still have those little, whatever those pieces of paper are, but if it's possible, if you see someone, you know, in a neighborhood situation, I'm not asking you, we never ask anyone to go to Walmart and mark those cars, because those people could just be passing through on their way to wherever. But at 2 o'clock in the morning for 90 days straight, either grandma's meeting a lot of nice grandchildren and or these people live here and just haven't done it to you. Done it to you. And before we move on to Mr. Cortez, yes, sir, you have one thing for the chief.
Yeah, I think on that, and correct me if I'm wrong, one of the things they were talking about is the fine is a must. So it's like $1,000 fine, and it was like 6 times the amount of tax owed. And so that's why the judges were throwing it out, is because they don't have any room to, it's a must fine.
Yeah.
They don't have any room to negotiate or lower that. But one of the questions I had on that is, could we, I know we do a lot of outreach through the website, and we put stuff in the water bills. Could we put something in and just say, hey, look, you know, and we can be nice about it and say, like, we know there's a lot of new people moving in here. Let's tell you about the RCWs as far as licensing vehicles, what that is. You have 30 days to get them licensed. Here's the fine. If you have a vehicle that is licensed here illegally, here's the fine and what is associated with it. So we are actively doing enforcement. You know, you may want to get your stuff taken care of, and that could help some of it. You know, I know my brother lives in Coeur d'Alene, and boy, you come into Idaho, they're changing their plates in a hurry because they hate everybody that's not from Idaho, and so Californians can't get their plates changed fast enough because they're going to get all kinds of looks and ran off the road and everything else. Here, we're just used to, you know, it's Oregon, California, Montana, whatever. We don't care. But I think there could be some outreach maybe done that way, and just tell people, look, this is what we're doing, and maybe see if we can pick it up a little bit. And then, you know, I know this, you know, I know the State Patrol used to do that, is park at schools and use your SRO. They're there already, and just.
That's what we did in 2016.
Yeah, and just say, hey,
at the high school.
Yeah, hey, here's, you know,
Informational, yeah, just informational.
yeah, you need to get it done, and you got 30 days to get it done, whatever it is, you know, and see how that goes. But going back to what Mr. McCoy said about the lowering it, we should be able to do that because we did it with the car tabs.
Right, we can lower it. I'm just not sure if then you can raise it back up. So my answer would be yes, you can absolutely lower it from 0.1% to 0. But if you were to get another 3 years in and say, oh, maybe we shouldn't have done that, we need to go back up. I think you can do that, but again,
Might need a new ordinance.
Okay.
we would definitely need a new ordinance, but
yeah.
I'm not sure.
Okay.
If you're on the boomerang cycle.
Yeah. I think you can, but again, I'm not a legal
Not something else.
attorney, so.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir.
So I'm looking at all these numbers, and one thing that's going through my mind is I know there's a need out there. There's definitely a need in our roads. We've seen that, we've seen the numbers, we've seen the evidence, and we drive on it every single day. So there's definitely a need. So I think that we can kind of all mutually accept. Now, how do we tackle that need? Even I'm undecided in terms of how we tackle that need. My question is more kind of mechanical in that, and you may have already said this, and perhaps I forgot, but if we took the 1% and then,
10th.
or the 10th of 1%, I'm sorry, thank you. Yeah, not the 1%. We took the 10th of 1% and then subsequently went to a vote of the people for the 0.2%. Do we drop that 1% that we took? Do we have the option to do that?
You would have the option to do that, yes, and then to just stick with the 0.2% of the vote. So then you'd go from what potentially could be 0.3% to
So we,
0.2%.
so under that scenario, we could technically, we could take the 1%, start taking, or the 1/10 of 1%, start taking that, do an active voter outreach or do an active engagement, just like we did with the annexation. And if the voters supported the 0.2 of 1%, then we could say we're going to basically cut that 1/10 of 1% taxes.
Correct. The other option would be to do a 0.1% voter. So you could do 0.1% out to the people, and then it would, between that and what the council's approved would be the 0.2%. That'd be another option to get to the 0.2.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah,
Either way would work.
okay. And then my other question, let's see here. And I'm assuming just with the discussion of, I think it was Councilmember McCoy brought it up as far as if we wanted to reduce it at some point and then bring it back. I mean, because we don't collect these taxes. These are state agencies that are collecting these taxes. So there's going to be some lag time.
Correct.
And it's not like a couple days or a couple weeks, probably a couple months lag time, I would
Yeah.
assume.
It would be the same as initiating it. So it was 75 days
75 days.
before the
Yeah.
first day of the next quarter.
Okay, all right. That's what I thought. I just wanted to confirm that.
Yes.
And then, so the lag time, okay, yeah, and, you know, I would be in favor, I like the discussion about the license plate enforcement. I think that would be a great component to have if we went out to the voters for, you know, whether it be a 1/10 of 1% or 2/10 of 1%, have that be a component of the campaign, right? That part of this campaign is here's why we need, here's the need, right? So state the need. And then these are some of the things we're going to do. We're going to be doing see something, say something, a campaign, right? Or something where there's going to be active enforcement so citizens can actually see that everybody's paying their fair share. So I think that would be possibly something that would be worth discussing. But again, that's a long time down the road in terms of whenever we go out for this campaign. I still think, and I still pretty much stand by this, right now is just going to be a difficult time to go out or to take. I mean, I think, and I get what the mayor said at our last time we discussed this in terms of there is really no perfect time, right? So I get that, you know, next year locally, it's an election year. And so it's more likely than not that there may be, you know, not a lot of appetite to go out to a vote. I get that. This year is just, it's terrible too, because inflation is just through the roof. I mean, we're seeing inflation figures that we haven't seen in the past 40 years. Everybody's spending more on their groceries and everything else. And so I guess at the end of the day, we, you know, I mean, one way or the other, something does have to happen. I do realize that. So I'm just not certain where I'm going to land on it. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so I think one of our most common complaints, at least mine, is the condition of our roads. With that being said, I am in favor of taking it to a vote to the citizens at the 2% rate. I think if we tell them what we're asking for, we can let them decide whether this is something that they can afford to pay for. That's all I have. Thanks.
Okey dokey. It is 10 cents on $100 is what we're talking about on the 0.1%. It's 10 cents on $100. And so you spend $1,000 and you're up to $1. I'm if you want to go see a road that is just about ready to go back to Flintstone land, go North Parkway, take a right on Northeast 7th Street and run it to the end. I can barely walk on the road for what comes through the bottom of my shoes. Those people don't have sidewalks. There's no sidewalks in a great deal of our city. The southwest side of the city doesn't have a sidewalk, didn't build them in the 60s and 70s, wasn't required. We're passing up on an opportunity. My good friend, Mr. Bowman, talks about big projects. Big projects get done, other big projects come along. What we're paying our part for what's going on over here by Fred Meyer, that's what, Southwest First? Is that Southwest First? Our part on that, every time we get someone coming in and telling us, just to do the paperwork on it is $250,000. Well, that's money that has to come from somewhere. It's failed 3 times in Woodland, which is just shocking to me in the sense that I don't understand why our folks and their folks can't grasp the theory that 60,000 people roll through the city every day, other than us. It passed in Ridgefield only because the promise was, we'll give you back your tab money. We'll quit taking the 20 if you'll give us a dime on 100. Or $2 on that. And so taking the 1% now and holding to that money, in my estimation, is the best deal that we can do, because it will be hard for us to go to Olympia from here on out and tell them, we need your help to do this, to do that. Well, you won't even stand up yourself. If you won't take the easy money from the folks from Yakult and Meadow Glade and Lake Oswego as they pass through, then why are you coming here? I would suggest before we make decisions about going out and waiting that you do take the time to get out of your car and walk some of these streets. If I lived at the end of Northeast 7th, and I believe that's Northeast 5th Avenue that comes up and it tees into, I'd be pissed off, not ticked off. I'd be pissed off that that street is in such foul condition. It will have to be taken back to the dirt and come back. So I ask you to think about it. It's very simple for us. And I think Mark is trustworthy enough. And I think the city's trustworthy enough. Plus, we'll own the reins. And we can say that the TBD dollar is the last dollar in. That we're not going to supplant. The city is going to do their part, and the people as part of the city will do their part. And so I ask you to go home and think about that, and please let's see maybe on our next go around on this if we can find it in our heart to go ahead and do the 0.1 and get things started, because the last council paid this building off. People in front of us bonded it for how many years? This was bonded for 20 years, right? The council before that instructed that the police department be fixed. We have been left from people in front of us who did their best. I understand that, but who did things without any kind of forethought. They bought the cheapest thing available. And I lived a career with the lowest contract, the lowest big contract, and it never works out. And so I ask you just to think about it. We'll bring it back in the near future and let's talk about it one more time. And if it doesn't do, then it doesn't do. But walk some of these streets, not the new ones. Walk some of these streets and see how these people have their streets in front of their house. It's not fair. It's not fair at all. And so, Ms. Davis, please.
I don't want to beat a dead horse, so everything.
Please do.
What everybody said, everybody had great points. I would love to see, like Councilmember McCoy said, a list. I think that would help everybody understand a little bit better exactly what our plan is. People like to see the plans. I would like to see the plans. But I am, as of this moment, and I welcome more time to think about it because it's not easy choice, but no time is great. I agree with Councilmember Cortez with the economy going, but I want, right now, I'd be in favor of putting it out to the people. They need to be the ones to say yay or nay, and they're gonna have to live with the roads. I feel sometimes that we could say as many good things as we want, and we impose the 0.1, and if it doesn't get done, then it's going to be hard to go back and ask for some more. I think the people have the need to tell us if they think the roads is as important as we do. So again, I don't mean to just go on and on about it, but I really do like the idea of seeing an actual project list, and I welcome thinking about it for some more time. Thank you, ma'am.
Wonderful. Okey-doke. Moving on. We're going now to see the first quarter final. So I guess you're back up, Ms. Lowry.
I'll keep this brief since it's first quarter and we're barely into the year, even though it's almost June.
Yeah. We're halfway through.
But we're reporting through March, so next slide, if you can.
Just like I have to stop sharing real quick. And start the presentation first before I share it.
It was up.
I know, but I want to do the.
It ain't working.
It's okay. I'll just start talking about the first slide while she has her figures out the
While she's thinking.
presentation. Yeah. So as far as
Takes a
financial
lot.
highlights for what's gone on in quarter one, sales tax continues to be up. We're up $72,163 to date from prior year, which is a 21.9% increase, which is an increase over 2020. So as I said, and it has a lot to do with inflation. A lot of it also has to do with our two biggest hitters is retail as well as construction. Construction is massive. You guys have seen that with the development going on. As the contractors do work in our city, they obviously pay sales tax, and that goes to the city because it's destination based. As development slows down, we'll probably see a downtick of that, or as the federal home rates start to increase and maybe homes don't sell as quickly, we may start to see a decrease. But right now we're on track to exceed 2021 in sales tax. As far as development activity, it is slightly down from 2021, but that's not really saying a whole lot because again, we're up in large numbers. We've had 64 single family residences that are new, related to 68 in 2021. Those are new homes coming into town. Overall permits for 21, we've had 180 as compared to 205 in 21. Building plan checks are down 91,000, about 41% from 21. And then planning reviews are also down about 30.4% from 21. Again, we have a large backlog of things that have been approved that they're in process. So it's a cyclical thing. So as the planning reviews happen, then they come in for the buildings and then we come to the permits. So we're going to continue to see development be increased. Real estate excise tax is also up $89,314 from 2021, which is 27.5% increase. Again, this potentially could start to decline as the home loan rates go up. Next slide. So as far as our overall general revenue for the general fund, we're at 33.7% of our total budgeted amount. We do book our entire property tax for the year as we have the levy rate. So that's a little bit of a skewed number because we booked the whole year at once. Then we have a receivable related to it. Licenses, we're at 32%. Intergovernmental revenues, that's going to be at 4.2%. And so we start spending the ARPA projects and then reimburse those projects. So that's related to the grants that we have. And then services, we're at 28.7%. So up a little bit related to those. Fines are down a little bit from the previous year. We had 45,000 for the first quarter, and this year we're at 31,000. And then miscellaneous revenue is about right on target. So next slide. Next slide. Next slide. I'm skipping these because they're not useful to you. I had deleted them from the presentation, but they magically reappeared. So general sales tax revenue we had budgeted $4.1 million for accrual. That's only 1 month of activity. That is March's amount that we received for January activity that happened within the city. That was 401,000. We have received $1.3 million in cash. So that's for November and December and January activity because there's a 2-month lag on sales tax. Next slide. And then you can see in this bar graph, the far right column is 2022, and we are outpacing the previous years by each month. Next slide. So as far as overall sales tax within the city, there's been about $158 million worth of gross receipts. And for what we sent to the state, $10.3 million. Transit gets about close to what we get at 1.1 million. And then the county, 237,000. And then the criminal justice and mental health, 158,000. We do get a portion of the criminal justice tax back into the city. We've received approximately $35,000 of that, which is about 22%. Next slide. So this shows you the general activity of what's generating that sales tax. As of the first quarter in 2021, there was about 46% that was from retail and sales. And for 2022, 41%. You can see that construction, which is right next to the big piece of the pie at the bottom, has increased, is at 20.9% of our total. Yes.
I didn't want to interrupt. I just curious, how does that compare to like the average Northwest City or Southwest Washington City?
We're far and above with sales tax.
I mean, as far as a percentage breakout.
I don't have access to the breakout. This is specific to each jurisdiction. Only one person within each jurisdiction can actually look at the sales tax data. So I'm not able to tell you that. Sorry.
No worries.
I would anticipate based upon the geography of something like Washougal and Kincamus is going to have a lot of retail and construction based upon what's going on. Washougal is not going to have a lot of retail. And then obviously Vancouver will have a lot of retail and construction. So I would assume, depending upon the jurisdiction, that it would be relatively similar, but we are essentially a retail hub for North County. So our retail is a large chunk of what we collect. So next slide, please. Next slide. So looking at expenditures for the general fund, we're at an overall 19% of what we had budgeted. Everything's in line with what we would expect at a 25% target. Intergovernmental is slightly above that because we've already paid for Q2 of our crosser charges. They charge us right at the end of March for the next quarter. Next slide. And then this shows you by department what has been going on. And again, executive is higher than the 25% target due to that's where our WCIA general risk insurance comes out of. So that's why it's higher than the 25% target. Next slide. I guess before I move on, is there any questions about the general fund or any specific department you want to talk about? Real estate excise tax, you can see 2021 was a record year, and then 2022, we're already on track to outpacing 2021, which will be interesting to see what happens in the next few months with sales.
And what can that money be used for?
Real estate excise tax can be used for things that are in your capital facilities plan. So it can be used for transportation, it can be used for water, sewer, storm drainage, it can be used for parks. Anything that's in a capital facilities plan, it can be used for. There's some restrictions to the second quarter REIT, such as land acquisition for parks, but otherwise they're relatively between REIT 1 and REIT 2. So the first quarter and second quarter are relatively similar. Then our streets fund, so the motor vehicle tax is actually on track, which is a little shocking. So that is only 1 month of activity. So we'd expect it to be about 8%, and that's what it is. And then as far as transfers in, that's essentially what's paying for the street fund. So as far as expenditures, the majority of what was budgeted out of the street fund is going to be happening in the coming months related to the street preservation work, as well as the seasonals and so forth. So there's not a lot of activity that's happened within the street fund. And the reason why wages and benefits are so much lower than the other funds is because that includes the seasonals that we haven't hired yet or started paying.
Motor vehicle is sales tax?
That is the tax on the fuel as it comes into the state.
Okay. So
And then
it's
this-
fuel, not car purchases,
Correct.
not
Yep. And then the
vehicle
state,
purchases.
and the state shares the money they collect from it at a per capita rate. Are there any questions about street before I move on? Looking at parks, we see some positive activity happening. We have exceeded what we had anticipated for our senior center. In the previous year at this time, the centers were not open. So that is a win. We're actually collecting revenue. People are holding events and continuing to do so. Same with our community center revenue. Last year, we had to refund and continued to refund folks who had long-term rentals who weren't able to hold their meetings and then just wanted a refund versus having us hold it for meetings because there was no end date in sight yet for the end of the restrictions. So that is on track to actually exceed what we budgeted for, which is fantastic. As far as expenditures, everything is on track to be within budget. So we're at 18.9% of the overall budget for parks. Are there any questions about parks? Okay. Storm, again, storm drainage services, what we budgeted for is at 0.25%, which is right on track with what we would anticipate. As far as the expenditures, we still have the decant facility expansion, which is ongoing. That was the large capital outlay that's budgeted there. And we do have seasonals again. That's why the salaries or the wages and salaries are a little bit lower than what we'd anticipate for this time of year because those expenditures have not happened yet. Are there any questions about storm drainage? Okay. Moving on to water. We are a little bit less on our water service revenue than the 25%, but that has a lot to do with a lot of our water service activity happens in the summertime when people are actually irrigating and using their water more. So that's on track with what we would expect for seasonal activity. And then looking at our expenditures, our purchased water is lower than it was last year at the same time, which is fantastic. And then everything else is on track with what we would expect. Are there any questions about water?
What's the fire flow test for?
Fire flow test is when that's something downstairs that they charge for.
Yeah, so when like a new subdivision or a commercial comes in, they have to do a fire flow test to show that they meet the minimum for their development. So it's a small fee that gets paid and then ops goes out and tests everything to make sure everything's right.
On the hydrants?
Yeah.
And it does not look like we've had any yet in 2022. Looking at the sewer fund, Again, the sewer services is on track with what we had expected based upon that had some built growth into the budgeted amount. And then looking at the other revenues that we don't have any activity with, those will be transferred. That's the ARPA funds for the equalization basin as well as 92nd Avenue. As those projects start to happen, those funds will be incoming. Expenditures, we are on track with everything. As far as debt, we're already made one payment, so that's why that's at 50%. And then once again, we have salaries and benefits that are a little bit lower. So are there any questions about sewer?
What's the debt?
The debt is the USDA loan that we had for, I believe was it the lagoon? Yes. That was what that was for. Okay, moving on to cash and investments. So overall, we're holding 63.3 million in all of our accounts. We have 33 million with the county pool, the bank's at 2.1 million, and then investments that are long-term that are getting some better yields are at 5 million. And then with the state pool, we're at about 20 million. And then over on the right, there is a breakdown by fund of what we have in each fund related to fund balance. Or cash and investments, I should say. Are there any questions?
On the vehicle down to bottom, 518.
Mhm.
That's all the police cars that have come in, have they been paid for? Is that police car payments there, or is that?
One of them is there, the one we've received. Those four. or
So we're just waiting on.
Correct, they've been, the chief can speak
We-
better to this.
We're waiting on one payment to pay for the other.
Out in the wind.
Sit in the field waiting for the computer chip.
Oh, boy. Those are the slightly used ones.
Yeah.
They're not new vehicles.
Slightly used, 4 miles.
And then as far as other vehicles, are there any other vehicle purchases for anyone else this year?
There is some in,
We did 5 public works vehicles amongst the different funds. I believe there was a water to sewer.
Already bought?
Yes, they were purchased in December and paid for this year, but we haven't received, we probably will not receive them close to the end of the year.
These are promised vehicles as well, that we've already paid for.
we have not paid for that.
We have not paid for.
No.
We've got the money out there for them.
Correct, there is a purchase order out there for them.
Okay, doke. Anyone else?
That is all I have. Thank you.
Mr. Cortez, I see you on there, sir. What may we do for you?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir.
So a couple observations I made from the presentation. I think it was kind of interesting, the year over year result of 2021. Was it 2021 to now? The new retail food businesses have gone from like 9.1% to like 10%, which I think is interesting because we've had over the past 18 months or more, we've had several high volume restaurants open up in the city. So, I mean, that's interesting that's growing. And I know we're expecting Panera Bread to be opening up possibly pretty soon, and who knows what else. So,
I didn't know about that one.
yeah, that was on a, what?
Crave Grill.
Yeah. So, yeah,
I saw that.
again, more businesses that open up, increase of retail food businesses. The sales tax revenue, it is interesting, you know, what is your thought on this, Megan, in terms of, you know, it seems as if when the pandemic really hit, obviously it shifted people's behavior to purchasing a lot online. So you had your Amazons and everybody of the world that were shipping like crazy, and the destination tax was very helpful. Do you think the behavior is going to be changed permanently as we come out of this pandemic, where people are like, wow, this is convenient. Why change this, right? I mean,
I think it's not just the online ordering. I think it's also people are no longer wanting to go into the big cities to shop. So there's been an increase in our local big box stores that wasn't there before. So I think it's a change of behavior, not just from the pandemic, but also just an overall cultural thing going on.
A migration shift, right? Yeah.
Migration, exactly.
Okay.
And the shop local was definitely a big push during the pandemic. A lot of, advertisements you saw on TV was shop local, support your local. And I think folks have really done that. And whether or not they continue to do that, I hope so. They have continued to for the last 2 years. It's no longer an anomaly. It's now become the new norm.
Yeah.
So I wish I could give you an answer that
I mean, obviously,
if I could read a crystal ball.
yeah. I mean, there's
I
gonna
think
be,
so.
there's gonna be little ebbs and flows as the overall economy, has its ebbs and flows. But I think more or less, this higher level is a trend that's probably going to stay, I would think.
I would think so. I think the convenience of a lot of the things that people maybe had not tried before is now very convenient to shop online and have it come to your home, and the ability of more businesses to be able to compete with the Amazons of the world and actually offer the same amount of shipping. Like you can get your stuff within 2 days. It's impressive for little to no cost to you as the consumer. So unless those businesses have a change of dynamic to where they start charging more for those services and people veer away from them, I definitely think is a very good likelihood that this will continue.
Long term. Okay. And then I'm going into my 3rd term here on council, but when you showed that one screen of our cash and investment holdings, that must be a record in terms of our holdings. As long as
Correct.
I've been here, I haven't seen it that
Correct.
high.
Yeah, you are absolutely correct. And a lot of that also has to do with we are holding almost $3 million in ARPA funds, as well as again, it's that shift of having that fund balance in the general fund because of preparing for the worst case scenario should the annexation fail. And then the annexation didn't fail. And then we had COVID happen. So now we have more revenue and sales tax than we anticipated. I mean, we were collecting $3 million in sales tax in 2019, and now we're collecting $5 million. And then we also had expenditures that staff was definitely very lean and conscientious because we've been prepping for these negative fund balances where we definitely operated on that. We don't have money. Like we're going to do things lean. We're going to do things efficient. We're going to save money. And so between all of those factors, it's definitely led to what you're seeing, which is fantastic because it gives the city the opportunity to do these big projects and do these things that council wants to do and be able to check off some boxes without having to go to the state and the feds to be able to do those things or go to the bank and ask for a loan. So there's definitely some opportunity here.
Use funds to match, to leverage our money, right?
Exactly.
So, but I think it can't be, I agree with every single point you just made, but it can't be lost. Aaron, you and your team did a phenomenal, you got to take credit where credit's due. When you did the belt tightening, what we asked you to do. I mean, this is part of it. Look at this. I mean, we're seeing this, we're seeing the results of this. I mean, it's not all encompassing. I mean, there's a lot of external factors, like you said, Megan, but I mean, that's a big portion of it. So great job on that. That leads me to my other item on our Public Works Department. I know we've had some staffing issues down there. And I'm wondering if we're adequately staffing our public works because we're expecting so much from them. We're talking about TBD, right? We're talking about doing new projects, making sure that we can keep up with the workflow. Mark, I mean, what is your department? I mean, is there a need in your department?
I think there is, and I think Aaron's going to talk about that at the retreat.
Yeah, there's definitely a need in public works overall, in each different fund. And I do have a presentation put together for that for the May 7th retreat. I think that's one of the things that we're running into all the way around. We're finding, we did tighten down. We weren't sure what was going to happen. So we haven't added staff. And one of the main goals with that is wanting to make sure that whatever we added can be sustainable long-term. And we didn't feel comfortable with that before, but now with the revenues going up and us being able to see a little bit of a jump in the sales tax, I think we're to that point. And it all kind of circles back to looking at the TBD. I mean, that's a big part of it too, trying to find a revenue source for that so that we're not constantly utilizing the general fund to supplement that. So then the general fund could kind of help get us to where we need to on a staffing standpoint to keep services where they need to be.
Yeah.
So I think that's going to be a big push of what we're going to be looking at and reviewing for the 2023 budget.
I think for me, I mean, you hit on several points that I was thinking of, but for me, while Chief, I'm a big supporter of the police department, always have been, always will be. But, our men and women of the public works department, these are the people that are in the front lines fixing, our roads, tackling, water issues, our wells. I mean, these are people doing the nuts and bolts of our city. And I want to make sure that they're adequately staffed, that your department's adequately staffed. So if there's a need there, I think, and obviously we have the resources. While we still need to make sure we do it prudently, but I think I'd like to make sure that your voice doesn't get lost, so we know what your need is. So, and that's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, sir. Can't have a city without water and sewer.
Yep.
Anyone else? Ms. Lowry, looks like I told those people at the audit that you are doing your part and that you're relatively fair and square, I guess. So relatively. When are they coming, by the way? It's not coming. I think it's Zooming, aren't they?
They have been here since April. Well, they haven't been here. They've
They've
been
been-
remote since April 18th, and it's supposed to go through the end of May.
And then aren't they coming one day at least? Aren't they?
Well, they'll come and do an official entrance conference. They have not given me a time or a date at this point, and then they'll come and do the exit conference likely towards the beginning of June in order to give us our award letter to go in our report to go off to.
And she told me that since we were Zooming, that the cost had gone down. Did they tell me the truth? Because they asked if we were telling the truth, so did they tell me the truth?
Well, I mean, it goes down about 1,000. It's relative. We're talking about a $40,000, $48,000 audit. So
Yeah,
they're
that's what
not charging us. I don't even think it was 1,000, maybe 500.
I told her that for what they're charging us, we buy cars with, police cars. And I told her, I think we'd rather have a police car, but I guess she's coming anyway. So,
Unfortunately, it's required.
yeah. Bean counters.
That's what they take you off if you don't pass your audits.
Yeah. Okie dokie. Seeing nothing else, we're moving on to administrative reports. Ms. Erdman, it's your turn.
Thank you, Mayor Johnson.
Yes, ma'am.
Earlier today, I sent out a staff report that Mr. Kermit had put together. As you guys are aware, Battleground is experiencing a really high pace of growth. We're seeing development happening all over the place, and we are running into, we're coming up on the heaviest construction season of the year. So I did meet with community development staff last week to talk about how we were going to get through the construction season. So Sam has put together some numbers for you and a request to add a building official, or not a building official, I'm sorry, a building inspector on a temporary term basis. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Kermit to kind of go through his information and we can have a discussion.
Good evening, council. As Aaron said, about every few months, I ask the question to our building guys, how are we doing? And it's, we never want to prematurely hire anybody. But we are at that point where we are in need of an additional inspector. Just to give you a snapshot of what a typical workload for an inspector is 20 to 25 inspections per day would be a good load for inspector. That gives them time in the morning to do some of their administrative duties, get out in the field for probably 6 hours and then come back, finish up their paperwork at the end of the day. We've been having on average 28 inspections per day. That's just a flat line across the board per month. The killer, though, is there are days where we will have 50 or more inspections a day. So what happens in those days is it takes our building official out in the field to cover for our inspector. And then, of course, that ripples throughout the department of just not having the building official doing really what he's paid to do. In terms of some of the growth that we've received, I'd say single family home construction is our primary construction type that where we have most of our inspections. Last year, we had over 320 single family home permits. That's the most since 2004. And then our commercial industrial square footage is up. 2019 was a really big year for that.
In terms of, I think the most important metric though that I'm looking at is what's in the pipeline. And I go to subdivision plating activity. We have, in 2021, we approved several subdivisions totaling 1,200 single-family lots. So what that means is they've been given preliminary approval from our hearing examiner. It can take 2 to 3 years for those finally to get designed, constructed, and then building permits being pulled. So there's a lot of green fields out there that you're driving by that one day are going to have homes on them. So that's kind of what's up and coming. I'll be given a presentation on other growth factors at our next council meeting. I haven't yet. We've had several apartments given preliminary approval that haven't been designed, haven't been constructed, but that's up and coming. So yeah, we're kind of at that point of that need. I did put together a table showing where other jurisdictions are at. City of Battleground is, I put together statistics for Camas, Ridgefield, Washougal, and us. We're the second highest population of those 4. We have the fewest amount of staff. So that's where things are at.
One other thing too, I'd like to point out is we did have some turnover in the building inspection department this last year. As before, we had one building inspector and one plans examiner. The plans examiner was trained to be an inspector as well. So when things got a little bit tighter, he could help alleviate on the inspection side and still leave the building official, who is also half fire, to do his job. Since then, we do have both positions filled, but we have a brand new plans examiner who is not skilled to be out in the field at this time. So we don't have that backup at this current moment either. So we are a little bit lower on the staffing level than we were previously 4 months ago.
Anything else, Sam?
Nope.
You're there? Okay, nope. Mr. Bowman, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir.
If it would be okay, I'd like us to come to the retreat
For sure.
and take a look at it at the retreat. Sam, do you think this needs to be a full-time position, or could this be a part-time?
We kind of
Meaning, and let me preface that, meaning part-time, dual role, building official or building inspector / whatever. If we could hire somebody that, do we need 2 building inspectors, or do we need a building inspector and a plans examiner? Do we need a building inspector and a code enforcement? Do we need a building inspector and something else? Could we get by with a dual role that aren't quite one full position?
Yeah, we definitely talked about that internally. Our greatest need is inspections. So that would be, we'd probably focus on, that'd be where our greatest need is. We do think we could keep someone busy full-time. We discussed what are those days where we do have fewer inspections. They could assist in code enforcement work. There's always code enforcement to do. And then if they did have that dual capacity to do plans examining, we'd have them do that.
Okay.
And
And
I think,
Our
right,
current building inspector has that dual capability. So that gives us a little bit more flexibility in that regard too. We can pull him back in for plans examination if we need to.
right. So yeah, Chris Jones, our most skilled employee, he's got that ability to do the commercial plans review and some of those higher level reviews. So, but with all of our employees, we're always trying to build and grow them into that dual capacity, because we know in a smaller jurisdiction like Battleground, you have to wear 2 or 3 hats. And I think in today's labor market, it'll be interesting just to see what we have in terms of, who we can recruit.
Okay. Yeah. And I just looking at what you sent us, I get it. You look at Ridgefield, you look at Camas. In this situation, and maybe I'm completely wrong, and that's why I'd like to talk about it on Saturday. I think we fall more along with Washougal. We don't have the building going on commercially. We don't have the building going on residentially like Ridgefield is. You're also dealing with 3 cities that have ports. And so they have more economic drivers that are happening. We tend to be mostly, let's build rooftops and, but I would like to see if we can dive into it a little bit deeper on Saturday and see where council goes from there. So thank you.
Yes, sir. Ms. Walt.
I also would like to visit it a little further down. Saturday sounds good to me. I am concerned that we received this at 4 p.m. today and really didn't get a chance to digest the information before making a decision. It was asking for a motion already. And so I think in the future, if you have asks like this, if you could come back to us and at least give us a meeting or two to consider. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir.
Sam, you said temporary. What did you say that purposely, or was that?
No, I did say that purposely. The idea would be to hire this as temporary and then assess where things are at in 2 years.
Why temporary though? I mean, and the reason, so my question is, obviously it seems like there's a need, right? But with the labor market, the way that it is, do we even have any shot on getting a quality person saying we're going to do this? This is going to be a temp thing?
Yeah, no, I think that's a good question. It's something that I kind of went back and forth on too. And we can kind of talk that out further with our city manager. I think the idea is we know what's happening with subdivisions and what's going to be happening with building activity in 2 years. And then I think the temporary position is more of what may happen at kind of the macro level. Is Battleground going to continue to grow at this pace? Definitely.
Yeah, I think going back to Megan's comment, we don't have the crystal ball. So is development going to continue the way it is? And with inflation happening the way it is, just more looking at a limited term basis, like a 2-year limited term with the option to extend if development continues. Just so we're not locking into a FTE.
When we hire though, we always have the right to cut, right?
Yeah.
So I'm just if I'm somebody looking at them like 1 year or temporary, I'll go somewhere else where it's not put out as temporary. So I might want to rethink that. I do agree, I'll look forward to talking more about this on Saturday. Although at the end of the day, one thing Battleground is known for within the building community, and these are the people that I talk to quite a bit, is quick turnaround times when it comes to inspections and permits and all that kind of stuff. And I definitely don't want to see that going down the road of the county. It seems like the county can't do anything right these days. And so definitely don't want to do that. So thank you.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I would, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would echo that sentiment as well. I've actually had potential development reach out to me and ask, when are you guys moving west? Because we do not want to file this building permit with the county. So if you could get out west as soon as possible, we would much rather deal with the city than the county on this. So when are you coming? And I believe I forwarded that on to your team and they contacted that person. I don't know how that went, but which was a great testament to the work that the group does. I just had kind of a general question that this piqued my interest. What is the pros and cons of having that code enforcement within the police office or versus having it under community development? What are the reasons why some cities have that with the police versus community development?
Aaron could probably answer that just as well. I can give you my 2 cents. I think when you have a person in City Hall, you kind of get better internal customer service. If you've got zoning issues, if you've got different things that are just happening at City Hall, if you've got that person in-house, you can kind of get them on those cases quicker. On the police side, it is an enforcement position. So it's kind of their wheelhouse. And there's going to be certain things the police can and probably do better at. So sometimes these are split.
Yeah, and I think with when looking at this position, we don't have a lot of time, obviously, with one building inspector and all the inspections that they have, that we're doing a lot of building permit follow-up with, residential buildings that may not be getting permits, roofing permits and so forth on the code enforcement side, that a building plans examiner or inspector would notice and have the abilities to address. Those are things we don't currently have time to do. So we would be able to ramp that up on those lower inspection days. So it would allow us to kind of shift that focus of code enforcement to more the building side of things. It just kind of depends on where you want that focus, right?
Yeah, I'm just curious.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yes. Anyone else? Seeing none. Anything else?
Is there specific information that you would like to be brought back on Saturday? I do have a presentation put together with kind of what we'll be looking at over the next couple of years and some of the justification, but if there's anything specific on this, please let me know so I can have that ready for you.
Okay. Okay. That's the ballgame.
That is the ballgame.
Council communications. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir.
Council, I just want to give you an update on Harvest Days. So we are having Harvest Days still. So Friday night, we'll have the cruise. Saturday, we will have the parade. I don't know, have we decided if council's in the parade, not in the parade?
And not there yet.
Okay. On Saturday, there's also going to be, like last year, there's going to be the lowrider show. There is a BMX bike competition going to be going on at skate park. We are doing, we're trying to work with PD to do some stuff on Saturday, and fire also. Fire is going to be doing the firefighter challenge with the kids again. That was a real big hit. Well, there's going to be a vendor fair. And then we've got some other things happening on Saturday, and then Saturday night, we just had LTAC meeting this last week, and they approved additional funding to put on a fireworks show for the community. So it'll be a professional show, similar to the one that the county did out at the fairgrounds a couple years ago. That's dependent upon, of course, burn bans or that kind of stuff, weather. So if it doesn't happen during Harvest Days, it will happen in the fall, or we'll put it off. We will be buying the fireworks show now.
So it won't be 4th of July, it would be at.
It'd be at Harvest Days, yes. 4th of July, we could not do because the company that does it has 172 shows they're doing that day. And so they did say if we wanted to, they could possibly look at it 2023 for 4th of July. But no, for 4th of July this year, that will, like everyone else, that will, they don't, well, that especially, they don't have a choice on staffing. They have to be licensed to be able to do it.
Is this in lieu of a carnival? Sort of, kind of?
No,
cancellation?
we're not sure. The carnival we're still working on. The carnivals had, they're having some challenges, but we're still working on the carnival. We haven't ruled that out yet. No, it's just to keep people around and, keep them in the downtown area. There's some other things that could be going on, but it should be a good event. If there's a burn ban, then, we may have a rain check and do something in the fall when there's no
there's
burn
rain.
ban. So, exactly.
Rain check when there's rain.
So if you guys have any questions, let us know. We're just getting the planning stages kind of finished up of that, and a lot of good things we think are going to happen. So
Is the mayor dunk tank still on the agenda?
the dunk tank is on the agenda, so there will be some invites. I think there's a whole bunch of people from the Cedars area that would love to take a shot at most of us. So, but there will be some stuff like that, but yeah, there'll be once again there'll be some like performances and stuff. They're bringing the stage back this year and doing some performances and things. And the school district's working with us on all of it. So if the fireworks show does happen, It will be at the school, so it'll be done on the school grounds. And
Do you still have access to the 4x4s or side by sides?
yes,
You do?
yeah, we have some. Pro Caliber in the past had sponsored us with those, but because of COVID, I mean, they have hardly any. So, but we have a few. So
I wouldn't mind doing something like that again, but this time with a banner, because we went through last time without any type of identification, and
yeah,
I doubt anybody knew even who we were. So
no, that's your deal. I'm just along for the ride on that one. So
Well, I'm just going to practice. Is that the best you can do, you sissy, Mr. McCoy?
yeah,
If I'm going to be in the duck tank, right?
yeah.
Is that the best you can do, you sissy?
So I'll pay extra for ice in that.
It's going to be full of dry ice.
Oh, yeah.
I just have one.
AWC is when?
June 21st. Yeah.
And the final date for anyone to be signed up is,
I want to, we can send that out. It's the
Please.
last week of June, but I'll see the final date.
it's in Vancouver. It's Wednesday, Thursday, Friday morning.
Mhm.
And so we talked earlier, it's a good way just to meet everyone in the county for that matter, and then everyone pretty much in the state. So if you have the time and plus it's in Vancouver, pretty easy.
A lot of good classes.
Yeah.
A lot of good material.
There's some good education there. Park Days, Mr. McCoy and I were there. We had a grand time. It was great weather. And the little Cub Scouts up here at the community center and the Lions Club and gosh, a whole lot of other people. And so really, really big day. And then where are we meeting on Saturday?
We will be in the Wooden Creek at the community center.
Wooden Creek at 8 o'clock.
8 o'clock, yes.
8 o'clock. Okay.
Coffee.
We will have coffee and we'll have some snacks.
Well, that means you'll be there.
You better call me.
Yeah.
Better call me at 7:30.
Yeah, snacks. Yes. Okay, anyone else?
Yeah,
Yes,
to
sir.
the mayor's point about the park, does this please give the best to the people that helped on that. There was quite a few city employees out there with.
Front end loader workers. and-
Yeah, there are quite a few leaves there at the Kiwanis Park. So there.
It does make quite the difference when
Yeah.
you, rather than wheelbarrowing those.
Still
and-
be there. if it wasn't for that
Yeah,
tractor.
we'd still be doing that. Seeing no one else. The next meeting is Monday, May 16th, 2 weeks from tonight. Meeting begins at 6. There will be a study session.
Yes.
And then, of course, we'll crank off at 7 as well. See you then.